Before I really get into my remarks, let me tell you that when I was in seminary, which was a very, very long time ago, I had a professor who taught all rabbinic students that every rabbi had to have a single line of Hebrew that they could drop effortlessly into any conversation. So I want to get that done right off the bat so you know I can do it. My phrase was always, Kama Nasim Daisa Kama. Now it means how many want hot cereal, but what difference does it make? You know, and it says, Kama Nasim Daisa Kama. Yeah, that must be right. So now I've gotten that off my chest, and you know I can say that phrase, and we can go on from there. I am incredibly honored to be here tonight for a number of reasons. First of all, the Akron Area Interfaith Council was an incredibly important part of my life when I was active in the congregation. It started in 1982, and it started as simply a dialogue between the Akron Area Council of Churches and the Jewish community. That was it. Those were the only participants. To come here tonight and realize the immense diversity that has occurred in this organization and the cross-conversation that now is possible to take place in so many different faith communities, this is an incredible achievement, and let's give the AAIC a round of applause. Secondly, I'm honored to be here on a night when Stewart's Caring Place is being honored. Truly, they embody the essence of service to the entire community. Across faiths, across national origins, race, sexual orientation, and gender identity, Stewart's Caring Place is an incredible place, and Laura Lee's right. Stewart was an incredible guy. And I wish there was not a Stewart's Caring Place named after him, because he would be here tonight. But I am grateful to the work that you all do. So thank you very much. A number of years ago, I was, much to my surprise, tapped to be a part of a program called the Academy for Spiritual Formation. It's a program of the Upper Room, which is essentially a Methodist publishing house of liturgical material. And they run these programs all over the country. They go for 2 years. Participants sign up for 2 years. In that 2-year period, they go away for 40 days to a retreat center, 5 days, 8 times during their experience there. And I became the first and then only non-Christian presenter at the Academy. I went so nervous you would not believe it. First of all, it was 2004, 2 weeks before the election in San Antonio, Texas. That's a whole other problem. But most of all, I had no idea of how I would be received. Would there be everybody in David? Would David be the separate entity that's there during this period of time? They had never experienced a non-Christian presenter in the program before. Would I be able to fit in with the group of people, by and large, a very varied group in San Antonio? Well, we had one Catholic participant, come to think of it. In all the years, there have only been 2 that I've experienced. One was a nun, but it's pretty much a Protestant group. Not long before I went, I got an email, I can do this in English, an email from the then director of the Academy, Reverend Jerry Haas. And he wrote in his email, the official Bible is the newly revised standard version of the Bible. I didn't have one. So I went to Borders. There was a Borders in those days. And I went to Borders and I bought one. You have no idea of how traumatic it is for Jews to buy Bibles with New Testaments. We don't buy them. We go to anybody on the street corner and we say, I'm Jewish, and they slap one of those suckers right in your hand. I mean, it's like magic. And if that doesn't work, we go to a hotel. Alas, they were all the King James versions, and I had to buy this Bible. So now whenever I do any presentation, that involves a general religious community, I use that Bible. I'm going to get my money's worth out of that Bible. That's the way it is. We're talking about interfaith relationships tonight. There's a body of material. I'm going to take my watch off just to give you hope. Doesn't mean very much, but there's a body of literature in Jewish traditions called the Midrash. Midrash is the sermon of the early rabbis by and large, mostly in parable form. They're myth, they're not reality. Myth is a wonderful word. For many, myth means somebody's other religion we don't believe. That's the definition of myth. But myth is made up of stories that are not true, that teach truth. And that's what Midrash is. And the Midrash teaches us a phrase, and I want to mention the phrase. Very often the rabbis, when talking about God especially, begin by saying, to what can the matter be compared? And very often they go on to say it can be compared to a king of flesh and blood, and then draw the lesson of how it applies to the Holy One, praise be God. I'm going to begin that way. To what can the matter be compared? And I'm going to suggest that this can be compared to a family. Families come in all sorts of variations. Some family members get along with other family members. Some family members do not get along so very well with family members. But what ties them together is that bond that they can't escape, and that's the identification of being part of that family. But I want to take it one step further. Let's pretend here a second. Let's pretend you're a parent. I don't know how many parents are here. You're a parent. And you have a child that's dating a wonderful man in her eyes. You don't like him. You can't stand him. You don't understand where he's coming from. He is different than your family. He's culturally different. Perhaps he's religiously different. You are going berserk. Well, the Hebrew is b'shuga. I'm not sure that covers it. And you have no idea of what you're going to do. But somewhere along the way, you realize that I've got to tolerate this person. I don't have to love him. I've got to, yes, him. I've got to tolerate him. And so, yeah, he comes over to dinner every now and then, and you don't say anything nasty to your daughter about him, at least very loud. But he's not included in the family events. You know, weddings, bar mitzvahs, christenings, all those kinds of things that bring the family together. He doesn't get an invitation. And I'm going to suggest to you that that is toleration. Toleration is, well, my wife Toby gave me a definition once that I kind of liked. She said, toleration, it means you can hate me, you can try to change me, you can try to transform me, just don't kill me. That's toleration. It's not universally the case. There is so much intolerance that's going on in our world today. I mean, it doesn't take very much to find it. Open up the Akron Beacon Journal, both pages, and you can read about what's happening, not only in the world, but in the United States. I mean, in the world, it's horrendous. We are watching genocide take place that's being done in the name of religion. We are watching hatred being spread in the name of religion. We are watching religious symbols be destroyed in the name of religion. And what bothers me most is that is what gets people upset. I understand that. When you see religious symbols being destroyed, we get upset. But let's be upset about all the lives that are being lost in the midst of this genocide. It's not just symbols. It's human beings who are being destroyed in the name of religion. I hate the fact that an armed police officer spends all day at the Schultz campus of the Jewish Community Center. I hate it. I hate the fact that the Jewish Community Board of Akron feels it necessary to have a police officer on its campus every single day. I hate it that my synagogue, especially if something special is happening, has to feel that it must have a police officer on its premises every day of that event. I hate it. It should not be. I picked up the newspaper the other day and found out, and it didn't pass, thank God, but I found out that the Tennessee legislature was planning to pass a bill that would make, and I quote, the Christian Bible the state book. I hope it was a revised standard version. As long as we're going that way, I may get some mileage out of this darn thing, you know. And that was my reaction. Well, whose Christian Bible are we going to use? Are we going to use the King James Bible? Are we going to use the revised standard version? Are we going to use anyone? Go to any bookstore. You have a whole shelf of different translations of the Christian Bible. Now, it didn't pass, but the fact that somebody thought it might really bothers me. And there's the Middle East. There's the horror that's going on there. All in the name of religion. But we can have tolerance. That's the first step. It's a baby step. It's a little step. But we can have tolerance. But tolerance is simply not enough. And I'm going to suggest to you that there's a second step. Once we get past tolerance, once we get past don't kill me, the next step is acceptance. The young man is now being invited to family events. Doesn't make the parents all that happy, but you know, he's been accepted as part of a group that will probably become part of their family, and therefore they're going to bring him now into it. Not only will I let you be, not only will I let you live, but I will include you. I'll make you part of religious definitions. I'll include you in my religious definitions. I'll respect the fact that you may be different than I am, but we're part of a family. And we can handle that on the level of acceptance. I mentioned the Midrash before. There's another work in Judaism called the Talmud. It's the work of the rabbis. The rabbis were the Pharisees. I know the Pharisees got a lousy press in Christianity. I understand. They really weren't so bad. But the Pharisees wrote this work called the Talmud. And there's a line in the midst of the Talmud that I will always remember, and that line is, the righteous of all peoples have a place in the world to come. You don't have to eat Reuben's rye bread to be saved. Corned beef, however, may be necessary. But if you go corned beef, rye bread, mustard, mayonnaise, lettuce, and tomato and cheese is an act of anti-Semitism. Don't want to catch any of you dealing with that, okay? But you don't have to be Jewish to be saved, the rabbis were saying. Indeed, they said that the world had 7 basic commandments. That's all they had to fulfill in order to be part of the world to come, the Olam Haba, the Messianic era, if you will. 7 basic commandments: no killing, no stealing, no adultery, no idolatry, no incest, kindness to animals. It says you shall not cut flesh of a living animal and leave the animal live. And the last one is setting up courts of justice. And the rabbis said that if you read from the beginning of Genesis through the Noah story, you can find them all. I can't find them all. I can make them up, but I can't find them all. But that makes no difference. Those are universal. Those are everybody's commandments. Not Jews, not Christians, not Hindus, not Muslims, not Baha'i, not Unitarian Universalists. It's everybody's responsibility. And all of those people will have a place in that world to come. That's acceptance. Now, I understand that built into many Christian traditions is the need to witness, is the need to reach out and try to bring that faith to others. I understand that it's built into the fabric of many groups. But if you're going to do that, do it with the respect of understanding that people may decline. That in declining, they may not be going to hell, wherever that is. If they decline, respect their religious traditions. Allow yourself to feel the cross-fertilization that comes from a dialogue between religious systems. I must tell you that I have learned more from the people who have gone to the Academy for Spiritual Formation than I ever taught them. I get to sit for 5 days with some wonderful presenters and wonderful minds, but I also get to sit with, in Hebrew we call it Amcha, the people. The people that are there. Most of them tend to be clergy, but not all, by far not all. And they're all knowledgeable. And we talk at meals, and we talk at night. Well, we don't talk overnight because they have silence from their last service until the morning. When I first was getting ready to go, my wife looked at the schedule and said, there are 12 hours of silence. How are you going to survive? You're Jewish, right? I mean, you know, we don't do silence all that well. Well, it turns out that I remember calling her in a period that wasn't silence and saying to her, you don't understand, it's not a matter of you can't talk, it's a matter of you don't have to talk. And after every presentation, there's an hour of silence before there's a question and answer period. Do you know how wonderful that is? Every minister in this room would love an hour of silence after the worship service is over. They don't have to deal with Mrs. Smith's lumbago. They don't have to deal with somebody upset with something that happened in the congregation. Silence for an hour. Then you can go back and evaluate what's happening. And so we respect those differences. But the last step is the hardest of them all. It's very difficult. Sometimes it seems like it's going to be impossible. That last step is what I term to be incorporating and celebrating people's differences. Going back to my young couple. Now you're not going to invite him to the wedding, you're going to go to the wedding with your daughter. Now, are you happy? Not necessarily, but you're going to be able to go with them and celebrate that occasion that's joyous in their life. Why? Because one, you love them. Well, you love her anyhow. You'll learn to love him maybe. Secondly, because it's important to the family structure to be able to celebrate that. What's the English for simple? A happy occasion. Okay, we'll go with that. You're going to be able to celebrate that happy occasion. Not easy. When it comes to religion, that's not easy. I remember when I got to the academy, they have services 3 times a day. In the morning, the very first thing that breaks the silence, the very first thing is you walk into the worship service, the silence is broken, you pray. Or you go. It's early in the morning. God's not necessarily up. Now come on, think about it. If God is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent, and if you were God, would you get up at 7 in the morning? It makes no sense. All right, you know. But this worship service is there. And then in the early evening, late afternoon, they have a Eucharist service every day. I've got that down pat. In fact, the last time I was there, when this service was during a Shabbat, Friday night, they had challah to break. I thought that was wonderful. But anyway, the third is the last service of the evening, which begins the silence. I did not think I could be comfortable in that worship. But you know, I sat down in that sacred space and I started to immerse myself. Frankly, there are parts of the service that are not comfortable. I never use true and false because I have no idea what's true and false.
Some parts of it were comfortable for me. I could fully participate. Some were not as comfortable, but that made no difference. I could sense the worship that was going on around me, that sacred space, the wonder of feeling people seeking to connect with their God at whatever definition they thought God to be. When I travel, and we've been blessed, we travel a lot. You go to Europe, what do you see in Europe? Castles and cathedrals. I walk into a cathedral, and I need to sit down. Not just walk around and look at the frescoes, not just walk around and see the artwork that's there. I've got to sit down, and I've got to sense the reality of that sacred space that's been created. And I've got to try to feel it and to understand it. I've come to realize that my prayer can take place anywhere. No matter what the tradition, I can be comfortable feeling the presence of God. I'm going to end here soon. That's also to give you hope. But I'm going to end with a refrain that my friends from the Unitarian Universalist Church have heard in different contexts. I'm going to end by saying, you're here because you value interfaith relationships. You're here because you believe in interfaith dialogue. You're here because you know that you can learn from people of other faith and be able, with confidence in your own faith tradition that's not being challenged, you can incorporate what you've learned into that tradition. That's why you're here. So in a real sense, I know tonight that I'm preaching to the choir. But I must say to you, no matter how good the choir it is, and Mormons have a really good one. Just saying. I mean, they don't fool around. You know. But I've heard a lot of really good choirs. Maybe not as good, but a lot of good choirs. No matter how well a choir sings, it is useless unless they sing, unless they shout it out, unless they bring forth that message of music. They're useless other than that. They just sit there. There's no reason to have them there. And so I say to you, it's not enough just to say, well, okay, you know, we'll see how we can celebrate these different... Preach it. Teach it. Incorporate it. Let another generation have it as part of their own very fiber. And maybe we can get past that intolerance that seems to surround us. Thank you all. L'chu l'shalom. Go to peace.